Hi, Terry here. This morning I would like to share a little story with you that I wrote. And one of the things I like best about writing is that you can just go anywhere, you can be anything, and really the only limitation is just our imagination. So this morning I'm going to be a rock. So come along with me as I read a story to you about myself. I am an ordinary rock. I have been around since the beginning of time, and like all common rocks, are found in abundance all over the universe. There are more of us than stars in the sky. According to human observation, we are irreverently classified as non-living, inert material. Although we have no eyes to see or ears to hear, we perceive far more than much of creation that possess both. We come in every color, size, texture, and variety imaginable. Our usefulness spans far and wide, fulfilling just about every application man can dream up. We are trampled underfoot by kings and peasants and tossed by children to pass the time. Human hands have pounded, carved, chiseled, and polished our petrified corpses into magnificent works of art so lifelike, we sometimes take a breath when no one is looking. I am an ordinary rock, and this is my story. Many years ago, I lay buried beneath the earth under a small rolling hill when the tremors of an approaching crowd roused me from my slumber. The vibrations grew louder as they marched onto my mound. Sunlight pierced my quiet little world when a shiny metal spade slid past and thrust me to the surface. Angry voices rose from the crowd as I lay motionless in the sunlight. With great apprehension, I sensed something terrible was about to happen. Someone pushed through the angry mob and dropped a huge tree into the hole. It was a strange kind of tree, with only two large branches that stuck straight out on either side. Then, to my horror, I realized a man was fastened to those branches. Then the heel of a boot roughly wedged me against the tree. I lay there for hours as the crowd screamed at the man hanging on the tree. After a long time, the man cried out with such anguish. If a heart had beat within me, it surely would have broken. Then someone stepped forward with a long spear and thrust it into the man's side. As a river of blood and water flowed out, it washed over me. The thunderous noise of the crowd fell silent as the ground beneath us began to shake. Somewhere in the distance, a curtain of a large church nearby was torn in half, and the sky grew dark, and people began to weep. Some fell to the ground, while others just fled away in terror. That is when I shattered into many pieces. I have been broken many times over the centuries, but never like this. The man's blood I was resting in began seeping into my crevices, penetrating even the hardest of places, staining every part of me a deep crimson. It was in that moment the tragic truth of this travesty was revealed. The hand from whom the blood had flowed was from the one who had formed me. Jesus, the Son of the living God, was the one who was hanging on that tree. How could this be? The horror of this wretched day surpassed every abomination that has ever transpired on the face of the earth. I was scarcely aware when the men with long ladders removed Jesus' body and dropped him into the arms of those waiting below. I will never forget the wailing of the women as the men carried his battered body away. Shortly after, the floodgates of heaven opened as though every creature from above were crying. The water swept over me as it washed away the gruesome ugliness of this terrible day. The pounding rain washed a river of blood past me, yet I did not budge. As the torrents raged on, the crimson within me remained. The water was unable to wash it away because it had not merely fallen on me, but it had become a part of me. The next morning, a soft blanket of mist covered the land. Through the fog, I sensed someone approach and fall to the ground not far away. A woman's hand scratched the dirt beside me as she wept, and I recognized her voice. She had been here yesterday. As she cried, her fingers dislodged me from the soil. Loose sand slipped through her fingers as she picked me up. Slowly she opened her hand, wiped her eyes, and peered down at me. Turning me over in her hand, she clutched me against her chest and ran quickly away. She took me to her home and showed me to her family, and together they marveled over my crimson glow. If only they had known the unremarkably dull little rock I had been just yesterday. The woman wrapped me in a pretty silver wire and hung me from a cord around her neck before leaving her house early the next morning. Together, we arrived in a beautiful garden just as the sun crested the horizon. Quietly, she entered a large place where humans placed their dead. The room was empty, except for some pieces of cloth. She began crying again, and I felt helpless to comfort her. From behind, someone speaks to her. They talk for a moment, and then he calls her name, Mary. And suddenly she rushes into him with such force, the cord holding me nearly breaks. The man holds her for a long time as they whisper to each other with words I cannot hear. When they step apart, he holds her face in his hands and wipes a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Then his gaze falls on me as he gently scoops me up in his hand and looks at me intently. For the second time in 3 days, I am drenched in the love of my Creator. But how could this be? I was there 3 days ago and know what was done to him. He was dead as a stone when they pulled him off that terrible tree. But here he is, standing before me, talking and breathing and doing things only the living can do. He closes his hand around me, and all at once I feel an integral part of all creation, from the smallest atomic particle to the greatest galactic galaxy, as we declare the awesome glory of our mighty God. Although I have never been a living creature, I felt like one that day. I was pulled from a pit of darkness into his light and filled with a kind of love that surpasses all understanding. He tells Mary how much she and I have in common, and it instructs her to go tell his brothers what she has just seen and heard. I bounce hard against her chest as she quickly sprints along the dirt path, bringing a message that will change this world forever. Throughout the generations that will follow, joyful shouts of praise will fill the earth, honoring his name. And if one day they should ever fall silent, I will not need a mouth to cry out. I once was an ordinary rock, but am no more. And that is my story. Happy Easter. Easter every day inside here. Love you.